Whether your Harley's running a stock CV or one of those cheap knockoffs from Amazon, this is the step-by-step rebuild guide you've been looking for. I'll show you the right parts, the right tools, and a few tricks to keep you out of trouble. I'm old school, and this is Vintage Harleys Revived. These are the two Keihin CV40 style carburetors you're going to find on your carbureted Harleys. This one is an original Harley Davidson with JIS style screws. This one is Chinese made, which has a standard number 2 Phillips in almost every one. This video will cover both these style carburetors because they are so close to the same. We start by removing the Phillips screws out of the float bowl. I like to keep things organized so that when I go back together, I can do it step by step. So there are the screws, the accelerator, pump rod, and the boot. Remove the float bowl O-ring and notice that there's a bunch of adhesive down in the groove. I removed the pin out of the float with a precision screwdriver. You may need to tap it with a hammer to get it out. So now you can pull the float up and the fuel inlet valve will come out with it. When you actuate the vacuum piston, you'll hear the air in and out of the carburetor. Disassembly is a chance to find the problems in the carb, and here's one. This butterfly will not open all the way. And I find the problem is where the pump leakage is going through the lever, it's sticking. I go ahead and remove the cotter pin and the E-clip to be able to remove this pump linkage and lever. And now it works exactly as I expect it to. So that is the problem I'm going to have to solve. It has a 180 main jet. You can see it's kind of marked up, so it's been messed with. A big, flat, standard screwdriver will take this out, no problem. This is clean. As I hold it up to the light, I go ahead and remove the needle jet holder and the needle jet. You want to make sure that all the holes in this needle jet holder tube are clean. Here's the CV40 carb rebuild kit from Amazon. It's not the one for this knockoff carb. It costs $13.79. I'll link it in the description. I think we'll have enough parts to make this work. Use a screwdriver that just goes down in this slot to take the slow jet out. And if it won't come out there, just tap it with the screwdriver handle a couple of times and it'll drop out. This is a 45 slow jet and it looks clean. I'm going to take the mixture screw out here, and this isn't even listed in the parts breakdown in the manual because Harley sealed these in because the EPA didn't want them adjusted. But it's missing a couple of parts that we'll have to put back in it. Just taking an inventory here, make sure I've got the bottom underneath the float bowl taken care of, and we'll start with the top. Remove the top cover, the spring seat, the jet needle, and the vacuum piston. And to do that, you'll need to remove the throttle cable bracket as an assembly. And then go ahead and remove the choke cable, or enrichener cable, as Harley calls it. And be careful here, this plastic gets brittle as they get older, and it's really easy to break or strip the threads. Any kind of choke carb cleaner will do as long as it has a straw and a good flow. So there's some goop adhesive down in this O-ring groove in this float bowl. I think best practice is these O-rings seal best clean with no adhesives or RTV. So now to the known problem with this carb, the accelerator pump was in op. We'll take this pump housing off. Notice the spring is between the pump housing and the diaphragm. And there's a missing O-ring where the fuel goes down into that diaphragm pump housing hole. So we will spray that out, make sure that's clean. And then we're gonna go through the whole carb. Every hole, every orifice, every passageway, every groove needs to be clean, and that's where this choke cleaner with a good solid spray and a nozzle does the job, no problem. If this is helping you out, hit that like button so it gets in front of more riders trying to keep their old bikes on the road. And if you're wrenching on a Harley, consider subscribing. I've got a whole lot more content coming your way. The jet needle and the spring seat look good. The vacuum piston is clean, and it cleaned the corrosion off of this drain screw out of the float bowl. At this point, we're ready to go back together, and always I'm going to put the manual beside me with the parts breakdown so that as I am going together, I can easily reference it because there's too many parts for me to remember how everything goes together and what the orientation of the parts are. The short answer is that reassembly is the reverse of disassembly. Honestly, it's not always quite that simple. So I'm going to go ahead and put this vacuum piston down into the body of the carburetor. Now, just a tip, when you have a diaphragm or an O-ring that has a groove that is supposed to sit down in, double check and make sure that that's completely seated in that groove before you put the two parts together. Because when you torque that down, it's likely going to ruin the diaphragm or the O-ring, and you are at a standstill because you're going to need a new O-ring or a new diaphragm. So when you put this slow jet in, it doesn't have to be uber tight. Just so it's seated and there's no way that through vibration or otherwise it'll back its way out. Note the orientation of this needle jet. I always put them back in the way they came out. And just like the slow jet, this needle jet holder and main jet, they don't have to be uber tight, just tight enough that they won't come loose. So here I am double checking the manual, and I find out that the mixture screw's not even in the diagram. When I took it apart, it was missing a washer and an O-ring that I've seen in every one of these carburetors I've taken apart. So I'm just going to have to do it from memory, and you could see how I put the O-ring and the washer in place. Now these cotter pins are super small, and even though I've got this big old box of assortment of cotter pins, I actually need the cotter pins that are smaller than what my smallest in this assortment is. So there's a small box of cotter pins that I'll link in the description that'll be the right size for this operation. So I go to put the E-clip on the pump linkage lever and it flies right off. I don't know about you, but I don't have these E-clips just laying around. And in my head I said, that's never to be found again. So onto the accelerator pump diaphragm, the pump housing, the spring, and that little bitty O-ring. Make sure that thing's completely seated down in that hole that it goes in, and then take the pump housing from the top and press it down with your fingers until you get the screws tight enough to hold it all in place. Now, all the screws in everything that I do, the final torque, I'm doing it by hand with a screwdriver that fits. So this O-ring for this float bowl drain screw I put on, and I grabbed the lubra plate and used just a tiny bit of it so that it doesn't catch as it's going in that super tight fit that it has. It won't make it leak, and the lubra plate will dissolve in the fuel. So as I go here, I'm comparing all the parts in my new rebuild kit with the parts that came out of the carburetor, and if they're the same, I'm using the new parts, including this fuel inlet valve, which was leaking. Now, just hang that from the float, and then it needs to be free, and set it down nice and easy so it's not bound up and it can move around as the float moves up and down with the fuel. This float pin on this carb goes in with my fingers. Some of them have a little head like a nail on them, and you've got to tap them in with a small hammer. Be super careful you don't crack the castings once you get it down to where it's all the way in. There are several things that have to come together here. Put your O-ring down into the grooves on your float bowl. Take your pump rod and boot and put those up into the lever, and then slip this bowl up into it as you guide the accelerator pump nozzle up into the body of the carburetor. I run these screws in with a gyroscopic screwdriver that has a clutch on it, so I set it real low, and then I torque them down by hand with a good screwdriver. And we have arrived. This carburetor is completely assembled. These are the parts out of the rebuild kit I did not use, and here's the finished carburetor. Well, that's a full CV rebuild. OEM or knockoff, even the performance version. Keep it running, keep it simple, and keep it on the road. I'm old school. Be good to yourself. We'll see you next time on Vintage Harleys Revive.